So thank you so much, Undersecretary General Lacroix, for doing this, for being with us this morning. I know it's a busy
It's good
week,
to be with you.
and I will make sure to keep to the allotted time. I know you have places to be and things to see to. But I wonder if, just to begin, if we could start very broadly, and then I know we're going to zoom in on a couple of specific situations and contexts. But to start at the sort of global level, can you just say how the COVID-19 pandemic has affected US peacekeeping operations? Are peacekeepers considered essential personnel who continue to carry out their missions despite the increased risk that we're seeing? Or are they working from home? What's the situation?
Thank you very much. It's good to be with you. And well, the missions of our peacekeeper is essential because we're talking about protection of civilians. We're talking about supporting peace efforts, and on top of that, we're also now talking about helping communities to protect themselves against COVID-19. And all our missions have been doing this since the beginning of the pandemic. They continue to deliver on their mandate, and at the same time, they also help national authorities, local authorities, and community in their fight against COVID-19. Now, the difference is that they have had to adapt the ways in which they do their job. Because they have to protect themselves against the pandemic, and they also have to protect the communities that they serve from the virus. So there are a number of things that they've been doing. Not everybody is working from home, of course, that is not possible, but at the same time, we have colleagues in the field who are working from home. We have the uniformed personnel, the military and the police, who have changed the ways in which they do things, particularly patrolling and things that somehow have to do with engaging with communities. But by and large, the work continues, and as I said, the missions continue to perform on their mandate.
Great. All right, I want to jump into a couple of specific situations, a couple of really dynamic situations. I know that UN peacekeepers are currently working to create stability in the lead up to some really pivotal elections in the Central African Republic in December. Can you describe what role your operations are playing in conjunction with the development and political aspects of that really complex transition?
Yes, well, on Central African Republic, as you're pointing out, the elections, which are going to be held at the end of the year, are critically important for the country, because this is really the time where the democracy will be sort of advanced, and the people of Central African Republic will have an opportunity to decide on their own future. Now, what are we doing to support that? First of all, our mission in Central African Republic, MINUSCA, is working very hard to help and to support the preparation of the election. That's not easy in a country which has weak infrastructures, but we're doing a lot in terms of training people, in terms of supporting the registering of voters, in terms of bringing equipment to different locations in Central African Republic territory. In addition to that, there is the more political dimension. In other words, reaching out to political parties and stakeholders, and encouraging them to engage in that process, and to do what they have to do so that these elections will be held. They will be held on time. They will be free and fair. They will be inclusive. It will result in a positive step forward for the people of Central African Republic. There is another dimension, the third dimension, which is providing security, and this is something that our mission has been doing for many years. There are some places where we're unfortunately seeing armed groups that are not acting consistent with their engagement, their commitment as to the peace accord. So in some cases, the mission has to adopt a more robust stance that is part of our mandate, but ultimately it's all geared towards supporting the holding of these elections. They're very important for Central African Republic, and they have, as I said, they have to be held on time and in good conditions.
Just to follow up quickly on that, can you say more about what tools the peacekeeping department has for that aspect of compelling sort of participation in a political process? I think people might often associate that more with, a development mandate or something that's, getting into sort of the nuts and bolts of institutions. How does peacekeeping fit in there?
Right. Well, I think there are different elements to that. First, as I said, we can provide a better logistical and security condition, and that is key. And then second, we can, and we do sensitize the people, the public. We have our radios, we have different ways of reaching out to them and telling them, look, this is about you, this is about your communities, this is about your country. So it is in your interest that you should go and vote. And it is also in the people's interest that there should be more people willing to be candidate, including women. We're doing a lot to promote the participation in women in elections. Now, another dimension which is equally important is what we call the good offices. In MINUSCA and the Central African Republic, our mission has a political mandate. In other words, a mandate to actively support political efforts. And these elections are very much part of the peace process. I mean, they're very much part of all these efforts aimed at bringing back stability and and durable peace to Central African Republic. So one of the important activities of our mission is to, as I say, talk to all the political stakeholders and tell them you have to focus on these elections. You have to take them seriously. There's no point in thinking about any other option, anything else than working towards a holding of these elections. And I think it's crucially important because the democratic tradition in Central African Republic has to be strengthened, has to be sort of mainstream, and we believe that we have a role in helping that happen.
And are you feeling confident at the moment that those elections will proceed on schedule and in a fashion that holds integrity?
We're doing everything we can to achieve that, and we're not alone. We're working with international partners, such as the African Union, such as the European Union. I think the international community is quite united in supporting that goal, and generally speaking, in supporting the peace process and the political process in the Central African Republic.
Right.
But ultimately, it's up to the Central African themselves. It's up to the civil society. It's up to the political stakeholders. This is really a collective effort.
Great. Jumping to another highly visible peacekeeping mission, how have you responded to the coup d'etat in August in Mali, which saw the president removed from office? I mean, given that you work in partnership with and at the invitation of governments, with whom are you partnering now, and how have your goals changed in that country?
Right. Well, you have seen that there has been a first important step towards the establishment of a transition with the appointment of a president of the transition and vice president. I believe the next step will be the appointment of a prime minister and then a government. And this is crucially important in the process that will lead up to the restoration of constitutional order. Nobody can be happy about a coup. Nobody can be happy about the disruption of constitutional order. That is not how things should be. However, we have and we continue to have our mandate, our missions. They're very important. Again, a lot of protection of civilians in many different places in Mali, and our role, our very important role in supporting the progress in the implementation of the peace agreement in the north, and we're dealing with a complicated situation in the center of the country. So what we have been doing in the very first days since after the coup, was to very informally make sure that we would be able to continue our mission. And this was done through unofficial contact. There was absolutely no ambiguity. It was not about surreptitiously recognizing anything, but just making sure that we would be able to continue our work. And I believe that the mission has done very well in enabling itself to continue its missions. There were a couple of logistical problems, which I think most of them were solved. Now, again, what is crucially important now is that Mali should move forward. Mali should enable itself to refocus on the challenges that it's facing. These challenges are still there. They're massive, and they're compounded now by COVID-19. So, this transition has to be established as quickly as possible. It will lead to a democratic election. We will certainly support, in due time, the preparation and holding of these elections. In the meantime, we will do everything to support progress on protection of civilians, on the implementation of peace agreement, and we will be also working to support the efforts in the Sahel region as a whole, because we never forget that the challenges, or many of the challenges that Mali is facing, are really regional challenges, and that is really where we have to look at as well for the purpose of helping the whole region to overcome these challenges.
Great. I'd like to zoom back out again if we could. How would you characterize the overall vision for UN peacekeeping under Secretary General Guterres, particularly at a time when there are questions about the sustainability of sort of large open-ended missions and some downward pressure on the peacekeeping budget? Do you see the model of peacekeeping changing?
Well, what I see is that the challenges and the crisis that peacekeeping is helping overcome are very much there. Ideally, of course, and this has happened in some cases, the perfect scenario happens. You have a peace agreement, and the parties faithfully implement their peace agreement, and you send peacekeeping mission that stays there a couple of years to support that, and then everybody leaves, and the country returns to stability. But we're facing reality, and reality is very often different from that model. We're deployed in situations where there are sometimes very weak and slowly moving political processes, sometimes hardly a peace agreement to speak of. If you look at the eastern part of the DRC, where all these armed groups are active and really presenting a massive threat to the population, we don't really have sort of national or even regional peace agreement to build on. But at the same time, we have a critical mission, which is to do our best to protect civilians and do our best to work with the national authorities to help them, really go to the root of these problems and find durable solutions to them. In Mali, in the Central African Republic, South Sudan, we're dealing with situations where hundreds of thousands of people depend on us for protection, for the delivery of support to the delivery of humanitarian assistance. If we were not there, then these people, security would be extremely endangered. And I also believe that in some cases, peacekeeping missions, I think that would be probably the case in Central African Republic and in Mali. Those peacekeeping missions have also been and still are quite instrumental in preserving the territorial integrity of these countries, their unity, and ultimately the chances for peace. I believe that if you look at peacekeeping missions, whatever their mandate, the goal is always the same. The goal is to help achieve durable peace. Problem is that we cannot be alone in doing this. We need to rely on the parties' goodwill. we need to rely on the support of other international partners and their engagement. This ultimately, it's a partnership. So to answer your question, I think that the key challenges that are, that we're facing are still very much there, and they call for our support and engagement if we are to ultimately overcome them. So maybe a last remark on this. I also believe that we've seen two things which are there to stay. One is that peacekeeping increasingly works with other partners in the field and also on the political side of it. I mean, the political efforts, that's one thing. The other thing is that you will probably see an increased or even further increased diversification of the type of peace operation in the field. Sometime smaller, sometime bigger, sometime with a limited mandate to maybe observation and with few people, sometime much bigger, sometime with other players in the field like the G5 Sahel, sometime without that or with less players other than peacekeeping in the field. And I believe that we have to be very pragmatic and we have to adapt to that. And this is why we're in addition to continuing our efforts on action for peacekeeping, which is really about improving the impact of peacekeeping, we're also looking at the future of peacekeeping and what lies ahead 10 years from now.
Great. And I mean, that sounds like perhaps a more sort of nimble or flexible or targeted approach. Do you anticipate that will require sort of structural or internal reforms beyond what's already happened with UN peacekeeping?
I think we need to be pragmatic. I believe that we need to think of what works best and not think in terms of cookie cutter approach to a particular situation. Sometimes you need more UN or maybe more UN peacekeeping involvement on the ground. Sometimes you need less. Sometime on a given situation, at some point in time, you need more of that, and with specific mandate, and then less of that, and differently. We look at Darfur, where we are currently sort of transitioning from a UN AU peacekeeping mission to another form of UN presence with a smaller, lighter UN mission, but with partners, working with the African Union and others. I think that we really need to be, as you're saying, I mean, flexible, pragmatic, nimble. And I also believe that, and this is certainly the way I look at peacekeeping missions, all of them are in transition. It's not only when you are transitioning from peacekeeping to a special political mission or any other form of international presence. I think that all missions have to be considered as being on a permanent state of transition. And because we need to adapt constantly to the needs on the ground and to the evolution of those situations.
Great. I wanted to ask about the countries that provide most of your peacekeeping forces, which are largely drawn from the global south. What needs to happen for those countries to have confidence that their personnel, the personnel that they provide, will be adequately trained and equipped? Is it just a question of sufficient resources to peacekeeping, or is there a more complex puzzle that needs to be put together?
Well, I believe that our troop and police contributing countries have made huge efforts, and they are really adapting to the new needs of peacekeeping. And I'll tell you a couple of examples. First of all, the sensitization and awareness regarding the need for training, the need for mobility, the need for a zero tolerance policy and a quick reactivity whenever there are issues of misconduct. All of this has been really changing and really changing for the better. And that is why we've been able to adapt quite substantially a number of peacekeeping operations, both on the military and the police, and more generally speaking on the sort of the missions as a whole. I also believe that the issue of resources is absolutely key, and here it's very frustrating to see that because of the the lack of full payment and payment in due time of assessed contributions, many troop and police contributing countries are seeing delayed in the reimbursement that we owe them. I think this is very unfair. This is particularly unfair to those troop and police contributing countries from the global south, and especially to those with a weaker economy. And the Secretary General really is extremely engaged in conveying that message to our financial contributors, to member states. And if you don't pay your assessed contribution in time and in full, ultimately those who are paying the price are the troop and police contributing countries whose men and women are in the field, risking their lives. So that is also, of course, a major concern. But as I say, I mean, the support, the engagement of the troop and police contributing country has been really very strong in terms of working with us to carry out all these adaptations, all these changes that peacekeeping need. Now, are we done with this? Not at all. Of course, we have much more to do. We are now almost 3 years after the beginning of Action for Peacekeeping, and we're looking at, thoroughly looking at what has worked, where we have seen progress, and where are the more sort of difficult issues, the more systemic issues where we still need to work, much more.
You've anticipated my last question, but I was going to ask if you could provide an update on what UN Peacekeeping is doing to work with your partners to hold contributing countries accountable for preventing and responding to issues of sexual abuse and exploitation by peacekeepers. I don't know if that's what you would describe as one of these systemic issues, or if that's one where there are sort of clearer, operational fixes. But maybe you could give us a sense of what's going on there.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, the zero tolerance policy is an absolute, demand and expectation. I believe that we are in a better position than we were a couple of years ago. The number of allegations is actually lower, and we're seeing in that number we're seeing allegation referring to older cases, which is a good thing because it means that people are coming forward with those allegations. We're seeing a much faster reactivity from us and from member states whenever there's an allegation. Then it takes only a few days now for investigations to begin, and it used to be more than almost 6 months, and in just a couple of years ago. I also see that there's a much higher degree of awareness, sensitization of the importance of this zero tolerance policy, and I also see that we're making progress in terms of supporting victims with the establishment of the victim rights advocate in our biggest mission, and financial support to them, as well as human support, so that they can basically, the victims can be listened to, can be heard, and can ultimately be dealt with, and their case dealt with humanly, and so that there should be in the end accountability. At the same time, I don't believe that we are out of the wood. I think there's more work to do, and I would name a few things which I think where I think we need further improvement. One is we need to continue and intensify our efforts to make sure that we know all about all cases, all allegations. In other words, we have to make sure that all allegations are brought to the knowledge of the leadership in the mission, and then expeditiously dealt with. I believe that we're better off, but I'm not sure that we're exactly where we should be. Number two, we need to continue working with our TCs and PCC so that there should be a proper accountability whenever there has to be. In other words, quick investigation is one thing, and here we're better, but then there has to be appropriate sanctions whenever needed. There has to be appropriate legislation so that sanctions can be inflicted on those responsible. We need to do better on paternity cases. Some countries have made a lot of efforts, other less so. And I also believe that we need to continue and even intensify training and constant, awareness efforts at raising awareness, because this is an ongoing effort, and it has to be sustained, over time. So progress, but still I think a great deal of vigilance and more efforts to make on this issue.
Great. Well, Undersecretary General Lacroix, thank you so much for the time. Unless there's anything else that you want to add, I know you're busy and have other places to be, but I really appreciate you taking the time this morning, and I'm sorry we weren't able to do it in person.
Good to be with you, and yeah, hopefully next time we'll do it differently. But in the meantime, have a good week. Take care.
You as well.
Bye.